faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books worldwide.
Hi, this is Sally's Book Club.
Today we're exploring The Sino-Japanese Naval War by naval historian Chen Yu. Last episode covered pre-war naval developments and strength comparisons between China and Japan. We then immersed ourselves in the brutal battles of Pundo and Yalu River, especially the heroic sacrifice of Ben Shichaun, captain of the Ziwan, truly moving. Let's continue the battle narrative.
As Jiwan sank, Zhen Yuan's main guns scored direct hits on Japanese flagship Matsuma. One shell shockwave flung a cannon into ammunition stores, triggering massive explosions.
Had flames reached the powder magazine, Matsushima would have been doomed, but luck favored Japan at the critical moment.
Poisonous gases prevented firefighters from entering the blazing lower decks, until suddenly, strong winds swept the battlefield. Fresh air rushed through damaged hull plates, thinning the toxic fumes so fire crews could finally charge in. After 30 minutes, Matsushima's fires were extinguished, but its combat capability was lost. Just as China might have gained advantage, a deserter emerged. Fang Bo-chan, who had been cowering rearward, ordered Jiwan to hoist false damage signals and flee.
Unbelievably, panicked Jiwan then collided with firefighting Yang Wei, sinking her.
Yang Wei's captain Lin Livzhong indignantly leapt into the sea to his death at 42. Other Beiyang warships soon retreated to shallow waters for emergency repairs, rapidly worsening the situation. By the Yalu River battle's climax, only Ding Yuan and Zhen Yuan held fast against 5 Japanese warships' furious bombardment. Though repeatedly struck in a blaze, these ironclad giants kept counterattacking steadfastly. Meanwhile, Japan's first flying squadron pursued fleeing Chinese ships. Unable to sink scattered vessels, they focused on isolated Jingwan. Overwhelmed by 4 warships' combined fire, she sank. I know that the Macedine pressed was closed his body.
Then, the unsatisfied First Flying Squadron started chasing the badly damaged Jingwan and Laiyuan.
But just as they were about to close in, Japanese fleet commander Ito Tsukiyuki ordered Matsuma to hoist the signal flag to cease combat and return to the main fleet, forcing the First Flying Squadron to turn back and withdraw. Ito decided to halt the battle early to protect gains, fearing night attacks by Chinese torpedo boats as darkness fell, a move that made him controversial in Japanese naval history. Anyway, after 5 hours of intense combat, the thrilling battle of the Yalu River finally came to an end. After the battle, the Beiyang fleet was severely weakened. Japan gained control of the Yellow Sea, and this fueled Japan's ambitions to invade China. The Japanese Imperial General Headquarters decided to launch a winter operation to wipe out the Beiyang fleet and seize Bohai Bay. On October 24th that year, under the combined fleet's cover, Japanese forces landed at Huaiyuankou on the Liaodong Peninsula. Jinzhou and Dalian Bay fell quickly, and the Beiyang fleet hastily evacuated Lushun port, retreating to Liugang Island base in Weihai. But while entering Weihai port, Zhen Yuan accidentally ran aground, suffering heavy damage and further weakening the Beiyang fleet. The next day, Lin Taizeng, captain of Zhen Yuan, committed suicide by poison at age 42. After the Bian fleet withdrew from Lushan, Japanese forces soon occupied the Liaodong Peninsula, and Lushan fell, but their strategic goal wasn't fully met. Because, with the Beiyang fleet still around, Japanese forces couldn't move freely in Bohai Bay, so they planned a combined land-sea assault to destroy it completely in 1895. On January 20th, amid heavy snowfall, tens of thousands of Japanese troops landed at Rongcheng Bay on the eastern tip of Shandong Peninsula, charging toward Weihai, 60 kilometers away. The final battle of the First Sino-Japanese War, the Battle of Weihai, was about to begin. Of course, this wasn't strictly a naval battle. In this final showdown, the Japanese first used their army to capture areas around Weihai, completely cutting off the Beihang Navy's escape route. Then, with their navy, they repeatedly tried to lure the Beiyang Navy out of Liugang Island base for a decisive fight, but the Beiyang Navy held firm. The Japanese Navy started sending torpedo boats into the harbor again and again, ambushing the Beiyang fleet and gradually wearing down its remaining forces. At their wits' end, senior officers of the Beiyang Navy committed suicide for their country. To save the civilians and soldiers on the island, they ultimately surrendered, marking the end of China's first modernized navy. And so it all vanished into thin air. Next up, let's get into the specifics. Weihai Bay is surrounded by mountains on 3 sides, forming a C shape that embraces Liugang Island. After Liugang Island was designated as the Beiyang Navy Base, extensive coastal fortifications were built on the southern and northern shores of Weihai Bay, known as the Southern Fortress Group and Northern Fortress Group. They guarded Liugang Island like 2 embracing arms.
But on January 30th, Japanese forces captured the Qing's painstakingly constructed Southern Fortress Group in just 1 day.
To prevent the Northern Fortress Group from being used by the Japanese if captured, on February 2nd, the Beiyang Navy sent troops to destroy all the northern fortifications. That same morning, Japanese forces occupied Weihai City and the Northern Fortress Group. By then, all land routes in Weihai had fallen, and Liugang Island Base became an isolated island with both eastern and western exits blockaded by the Japanese combined fleet. The Beiyang fleet had no choice but to pin their hopes on land reinforcements beyond the mountains. But what they didn't know was that after learning of Weihai's complete land loss, Shandong Governor Li Bingheng had abandoned Yantai and Weihai, making a strategic retreat. Back to the Navy, during the land battles in Weihai, the Japanese combined fleet not only supported army operations, but also repeatedly tried to lure the Beiyang fleet out for a decisive battle.
But the Beiyang fleet remained unmoved, only providing long-range support from the base to aid the army's defense.
Later, Ito Tsukiyuki was forced to change tactics. Instead of luring the fleet out, he decided to send torpedo boats to breach the mine defenses at Weihai Bay's entrance and sneak in for ambushes. After that, the Japanese frequently used torpedo boats to infiltrate the harbor, ambushing ships like Dingyuan, Laiyuan, and Weiyuan, which were hit by torpedoes and either ran aground or sank. Yet, there was no sign of land reinforcements. On February 7th, the Japanese combined fleet launched a massive assault from the eastern entrance of Weihai Bay, temporarily neglecting the blockade at the western entrance. The Beiyang fleet's torpedo boat squadron was ordered to exit via the western entrance to attack Japanese ships and cover the escape of a messenger seeking help. After exiting the harbor, the torpedo boat saw the messenger's small boat fleeing toward Yantai. With their position spotted by Japanese warships and no time to return to base, they had no choice but to flee toward Yantai too. All along, but the fleeing fleet was soon slaughtered by the Japanese Navy, either sunk or captured. Fortunately, the messenger Li Zanyuan managed to reach Yantai. However, there were no reinforcements left for the Beiyang fleet, and the departure of the torpedo boats weakened the fighting spirit of the remaining naval and land forces on Liugang Island. On the evening of February 8th, nearly 1,000 people gathered, pleading before the Navy office, begging Admiral Ding Ruchang to spare their lives.
Gazing at comrades who'd fought alongside him through life and death, Ding Ruchang painfully made a promise.
He vowed that if no reinforcements arrived by February 11th, he'd grant everyone safe passage.
On February 9th, Lunar Lantern Festival, the Japanese combined fleet attacked again. Ding led Jingwan and Pingwan into battle. Jingwan sank under fierce bombardment.
By then, the Beiyang Navy's only operational major warships were Pingyuan, Jiyuan, and Guanbing, with most ammunition depleted. With no options left, Admiral Ding ordered the scuttling of their grounded flagship Dingyan to prevent enemy capture. After Dingjuan sank, Captain Liu Buchan fulfilled his oath by taking poison that night, dying with his ship at 43. Ding then repeatedly ordered Zenyuan destroyed, but no crew member would carry it out. On the night of February 11th, Ding's promised deadline arrived with no sign of reinforcements. Nearly 10,000 soldiers and civilians gathered before the Navy office begging for survival. In utter despair, Ding Ruchang committed suicide for his country at 59. China's first naval fleet commander vanished beneath the Yellow Sea's waves. On February 12th, Doutai Nu Changbing and others submitted surrender documents to Japan under Ding's name. And then, on February 17th, the Japanese fleet received Liaogang Island Base and surviving Beiyang forces. Warships raised Japanese flags. Only Kangji flew the Qing Dragon flag at half-mast, slowly sailing from Weihai Bay carrying black coffins of Ding Ruchang, Liu Buchang, Lin Taizong, and remaining sailors. Thus, China's first modern naval fleet, the once mighty Beiyang fleet, was completely destroyed. Finally, let's briefly discuss why the Beiyang Navy failed. Author Chen Yue argues many Chinese studies of the war, unable to explain technical failures, simplistically blamed court corruption and officer incompetence, as if changing captains could have reversed the outcome. But objectively analyzing Beiyang warships' speed, firepower, and ammunition quality reveals massive equipment gaps with Japan. Chen contends that for modern naval warfare, defined by technical competition, this gap was the fatal flaw. For example, in the Battle of the Yalu River, where the main forces of the Chinese and Japanese navies clashed, the Beiyang fleet's inferior coal quality not only further reduced their already low speed, but also produced thick black smoke and enlarged, making them highly visible. This allowed the Japanese fleet to spot them nearly an hour early. Another example, in the Battle of the Yalu River, although both sides had 12 warships each, the Beiyang Navy had only 58 large-caliber guns, over 100 millimeters, while the Japanese Navy had 104, mostly rapid-fire guns. At that time, the Beiyang Navy primarily used solid shells filled with sand, while explosive shells were scarce and mostly filled with traditional black powder, resulting in weak explosions. In contrast, the Japanese Navy used only explosive shells filled with the famous shimose powder. Upon explosion, these shells produced massive shockwaves and fires that could ignite steel, causing severe trouble for the Beiyang Navy. As for the often criticized issue of Beiyang officers' competence, the author's detailed data analysis reveals that their overall combat proficiency was actually far superior to the Japanese Navy's. For instance, in the Battle of the Yalu River, each 150mm Krupp gun on Jenyuan fired an average of 74 shells, while similar guns on the Japanese warship Naniwa fired only 50 per gun, demonstrating the gap in tactical skills. Unfortunately, times have changed. This is no longer an era where superior officer competence alone can win wars. Since the overall backwardness of the Beiyang Navy's equipment was the main cause of their naval defeat, let's delve deeper. Why was their equipment so outdated? The direct cause was the Ministry of Revenue's proposal in the early 1990s to prohibit the Navy from purchasing foreign weapons. However, when this proposal was made, why did officials, even the Emperor and Empress Dowager who once strongly supported naval development, suddenly lose enthusiasm? Almost no one opposed it except those directly involved, like Li Hongzhang. The author believes this was mainly due to traditional Chinese views of the ocean and coastal defense. Chinese civilization originated inland, long viewing the vast sea as a natural, great wall protecting us. When Western powers shattered this natural wall with their ironclads and cannons, we began buying warships and building a navy to defend the homeland, but essentially not to pursue maritime interests, only to strengthen coastal defense. When the Beiyang fleet was completed, most believed coastal defense goals were achieved, so massive investments naturally stopped. Little did they know warship technology evolved rapidly. Falling behind once could mean total defeat. Thus, the stagnation of the Beiyang Navy and its ultimate defeat weren't just mistakes by one or two decision makers. They resulted from Chinese society's fundamental lack of understanding about the ocean. So, the deeper cause of defeat was cultural failure. Our coverage of the naval battles ends here, but did you notice the Sino-Japanese War also involved massive land campaigns? While explaining naval contexts, we mentioned land battles like the Battle of Pyongyang and Asan, but since they're not this book's focus, we didn't elaborate. Actually, the Qing court saw the army as the war's main force. The navy was just its auxiliary. For example, the massive Huayu River battle wasn't an active move to control the Yellow Sea, but a forced encounter while escorting army reinforcements. Then why do most studies focus on naval battles, making people think this was solely a naval war? There are roughly 4 reasons. First, the 21st century is the maritime century. Prosperity faces the sea, decline turns from it. Building a maritime power is China's crucial national policy today, and the Beiyang fleet's rise and fall represents China's early modern maritime efforts. Analyzing its failures holds special relevance for modern China. This most relevant aspect draws greater attention. Second, naval battles saw the fiercest confrontations. Both navies had modernized, making them worthy opponents. Though ultimately defeated, the Beiyang Navy fought honorably, with remarkable moments. Land battles differed. The Qing army, still in cold weapon era, proved no match for Japan's modernized forces. It should be noted that during the First Sino-Japanese War, the Qing army's equipment wasn't backward. Their rifles and cannons were even more advanced than Japan's. But outdated military organization, leadership, and logistics systems prevented effective utilization, resulting in historical records full of Qing troops collapsing at first contact and fleeing at rumors. For example, 15,000 Qing troops abandoned fortified Pyongyang after less than a day. Similarly, well-supplied Lushan fortress with 10,000 defenders held under 24 hours before scattering. Naturally, naval battles attract more attention. Moreover, the Sino-Japanese naval battles draw focus because the Beiyang Navy embodied 30 years of the late Qing's self-strengthening movement. This movement was a crucial modernization reform centered on strengthening national defense through military modernization, with the Beiyang Navy as its crown jewel. Its creation spurred modern mining, railways, machinery, arms manufacturing, and education. Developing a navy required shipbuilding, hence Fuzhou Shipyard and Jiangnan Arsenal. Naval development needed trained personnel, leading to naval academies like Fuzhou and Tianjin. Warships required coal, creating the famous Kaiping mines. Coal needed efficient transport to the navy, hence the Tangshan-Dash Zhuge-Zhuang Railway, among others. The Beiyang Navy's destruction meant not just military defeat, but the bankruptcy of the entire self-strengthening movement, proving the path of learning foreign technology to strengthen the nation had failed. Finally, differing recent records also make naval battles more prominent than land warfare. During the war, Western attention focused on naval confrontations, leaving abundant news reports and specialized studies. Many foreign advisors within the Beiyang Navy witnessed its destruction firsthand, leaving numerous primary records. Japan also preserved detailed naval archives, providing rich research materials. Land warfare research suffers from scarce fragmented records directly limiting studies. To deeply understand this war, start with naval battles. History serves as a mirror, revealing patterns of rise and fall. Now, over 120 years later, generations of Chinese still reflect on that humiliating history. Because the First Sino-Japanese War wasn't just a war, in some ways it completely rewrote the modern fates of both China and Japan. After the defeat in the war, China was pushed into the ranks of third-rate nations, forced to sign the humiliating Treaty of Shimonoseki with Japan, ceding territory and paying reparations, while other Western powers intensified their scramble to carve up China. The war, with its bloody realities, shattered our dream of China as the celestial empire. Enlightened minds began pondering how to save the nation, and self-strengthening and national salvation became the era's main theme. Meanwhile, Japan, relying on colonies like Korea and Taiwan, and the 230 million taels of silver reparations from Qing China rapidly rose as a modern East Asian power. But this made Japan taste the sweetness of foreign aggression, pushing it onto militarism and half a century of invasions that brought deep suffering to China and Asia. Thus, in history, the war is also called the Jiawu Calamity. Scholar Liang Chao once said, "The awakening of our nation from a 4,000-year slumber truly began with this battle." What are your thoughts on this first Sino-Japanese War naval battle? Feel free to leave your comments below. All right, that wraps up our interpretation of the second part of the book on the first Sino-Japanese War naval battle. The listening notes are below the audio. See you next time.